Good evening. Welcome to Southern California Edison's Wildfire Safety Community Livestream meeting for Acton, Agua, Dulce, Green Valley, and Lake Hughes. My name is Dave Ford, and I'm the Government Relations Manager for Southern California Edison. We greatly appreciate that you took the time to participate this evening, as well as submitting your questions when you registered for this meeting. I would also like to thank the supervisor for LA County, Catherine Barger, and the Acton and Agua Dulce Town Council, as well as the state and federal elected officials and their staff for joining us tonight. We appreciate that you always have had open lines of communication, and we look forward to our ongoing partnership. Let me start by saying that we recognize how important it is for you and your families to have electricity, especially as a pandemic, when many of you were working and learning from your home. Our company is focused on safety, providing reliable service to our customers and communities. Our number one priority remains public safety. As California prepares for the upcoming wildfire season, we want to provide you with the latest information on how we are preparing and what you can do to be prepared. During the most recent wildfire season, we implemented Public Safety Power Shutoff, or PSPS, to reduce the threat of wildfires. We know that many of you have experienced multiple PS events. We know that these outages are painful and heard your concerns. We are committed to reducing the need of PSPS outages, and we'll be sharing more information with you during this presentation. Please know that if you get disconnected or you need to drop off early, this meeting is being recorded and will be posted on our website at www.see.com/wildfire. Next slide, please. As always, your feedback is extremely important to us, and we encourage you to submit your questions. Because we have a large number of attendees, we will be taking questions through the Q&A window. You should be able to see the window on the right side of the screen. If there is a similar question already being asked that you would like to be answered, you can click on the heart icon next to the question to like it. We will address the question that receives the most likes first and then go down from there. We ask that you please ask questions that are relevant to the topic and the material being presented. We will do our very best to answer as many questions as possible within the allotted time. Next slide, please. Here tonight are presenters. Eric, who is Vice President of PSPS Readiness, who will share our wildfire mitigation and PSPS action plans. Terry Ohanian, Director of Expedited Grid Hardening, who will share our efforts to reduce the need for PSPS. And Dave Kantz, who is Senior Manager with Customer Service, who will share information about our customer care and community engagement efforts. Next slide, please. Here are the topics for tonight that we will cover as part of our presentation. We hope that the information will address many of your questions. Following the presentation, we will open it up to Q&A and answer questions submitted in the Q&A window. Our agenda tonight will go like this: the 2020 wildfire season, SCE wildfire mitigation and PSPS, reducing the need for PSPS, PS notifications, customer care programs, engaging our communities, resources, and then we'll go into a Q&A. Next slide, please. So at this time, I'd like to hand this over to Eric to talk about our wildfire mitigation and PSPS action plans.
Thank you, David, and good evening, everyone. I want to express my sincere appreciation for your participation and engagement in joining us today. We have a lot of information to cover with you, and we look forward to your questions. Now, our conversation today is about wildfire safety overall, and will include improvements we're making to our public safety power shutoff program. 2020 was a year of unimaginable tragedy for many Californians. And across the state, 2020 was the worst year on record, with nearly 10,000 fires that burned over 4.2 million acres, which represents about 4% of all the land in California. And here in Southern California, from summer to the end of the year, we had experienced record dry fuel levels from heat waves and lack of precipitation. There were 70% more red flag days in 2020 versus 2019, and rainfall totals in Central and Southern California were 50 to 75% below average. And as you can see here on this chart, 5 of the 6 largest wildfires in California all happened in 2020, which is a sobering statistic and highlights the need for all of us to stay focused on our efforts to reduce both the risks and mitigate the impacts. Next slide. And towards the end of the year, we had more Santa Ana wind events, ultimately impacting 138,000 of our customers across our high fire risk areas, adding to the challenges with the COVID-19 pandemic. We understand the difficulties that being without power has for people working from home, children going to school online, and for customers who have access and functional needs. And with the weather patterns experienced in 2020, the PSPS events we saw between November and December and into mid-January was a much different experience than what we saw in 2019. All of this underscores the importance of having a more resilient grid that will significantly reduce the risk of utility equipment sparking catastrophic wildfires and the need for PSPS as a measure of last resort. And so, SE remains dedicated to keeping our community safe by making our infrastructure more resilient against the increasing threat of extreme weather conditions that are driven by climate change. And as we look ahead and preparing for 2021, we need to take into account the events of 2020 and are working to make significant progress in reducing the risk of wildfires, as well as reducing the risk and impact of PSPS. Next slide. Now, this slide summarizes key achievements in our wildfire mitigation plan, which we met or exceeded despite the challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic. To improve the overall resiliency of our infrastructure, we installed over 960 miles of insulated conductors and over 6,000 fire-resistant poles, performed detailed inspections of our distribution and transmission infrastructure, and assessed nearly 10,000 trees and removed more than 12,200 that could have fallen into power lines and lead to ignitions. We also installed over 3,000 fast-acting fuses and 49 additional devices to better segment our system that will support in reducing PSPS. We're also bolstering our situational awareness through our network of 166 high-definition cameras that cover our high fire risk areas and installed an additional 590 weather stations to have now over 1,000 monitoring real-time conditions that help us assess conditions in real time. These actions are intended to continue increasing the resilience of our infrastructure that will help minimize service disruptions during fires, regardless of ignition source. This will also support improving fire agencies' ability to detect and respond to emerging fires, as well as continually improve the coordination between utility, state, and local emergency management personnel. We want to thank California's leadership, lawmakers, and various agency personnel for addressing what is critically important to protect public safety. We're also proud of our partnership with local and tribal governments, first responders, and the public who have all come together to further reduce the risk of potentially devastating wildfires. And as we turn our attention to PSPS, we're building upon the work from our wildfire mitigation activities and adding to it additional criteria and requirements to directly address the frequency and impact of PSPS and what it's had in our communities. We seriously take the concern we heard about our PSPS execution, and we know we have to do better. On February 12th, we filed our action plan with the California Public Utilities Commission that addressed 5 main areas to reduce the need for PSPS, improve our execution, reduce the impact of PSPS when events do occur, keep our customers and partners informed, and enhance our after-action post-event reports, which we file after every event. And I'll summarize these 5 areas and then hand it over to our other presenters who will cover some of this in much more detail. First addresses reducing the need for PSPS, which means hardening the grid, especially to help those locations where our customers have been impacted numerous times. Now, while PSPS has impacted about 20% of our infrastructure located in high fire areas, communities like Acton and Agua Dulce have been impacted on numerous occasions. So in our action plan, we are specifically focusing on those frequently impacted circuits that have experienced 4 or more de-energizations since 2019, including January this year, with the goal of reducing the scope, frequency, and duration of PSPS events. Our work scope includes accelerated grid hardening on 72 circuits by replacing our bare overhead wire with covered insulated conductor, reviewing our operations, and adding more automation to our distribution system. Now, while this doesn't mean that there won't be situations in which PSPS still won't be needed, the frequency and duration should significantly decrease, as you'll hear more about in the next few slides. The second area of focus is to improve the execution of PSPS. And one of the ways we expect to do that is by providing better transparency into the decision-making process. This means providing more information through various channels, including our website, to better provide an understanding of our PSPS protocols and factors that go into making the decision to de-energize. And we're also going to be making significant improvements to our PSPS notifications that you receive before, during, and after events. We understand the issues and frustrations surrounding how notifications of PSPS events are received, and that we need to do a better job of informing our customers about the status to better prepare you for when they occur. And for people who are on medical baseline, we will be ensuring that notifications are positively received in addition to our critical care customers. And when PSPS events do occur, we will be increasing our efforts to reduce the impact, especially on those with access and functional needs. We'll be working to increase enrollment in our medical baseline program and expand participation in other areas, such as our critical care battery backup program and other incentives to support providing more backup solutions. We'll also be working with local and tribal governments to further look for ways to increase community resiliency by expanding our services that will enhance the safety of the community overall. The fourth area of focus is to keep our partners and customers clearly and consistently informed. And you can expect better ways to receive educational materials, including our website, for more information about PSPS. And for our partners, we will leverage technology to improve information sharing and coordination as we work together to plan and respond in a more comprehensive way. And lastly, we're working to enhance and improve our post-event reporting to make them more transparent and clear for our stakeholders. We learned a lot in our experiences so far, and these reports go a long way in continually improving our performance after every event. So in a nutshell, the outcomes that we are expecting are to reduce the scope and frequency of PSPS, improve our coordination and engagement with our partners and critical infrastructure customers, expand our outreach and enrollments with our customers, and improve our post-event reports. So now I'll hand over to Terry to cover grid hardening and our efforts to reduce the need for PSPS.
Yeah, thank you, Eric, and good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'll be covering one of our focus areas, which is to reduce the need for PSPS. And to that end, we have developed a concerted effort focusing primarily on frequently impacted circuits, or in this case, circuits that experienced 4 or more public safety power shutoffs since 2019. Now, this effort is targeted for the hardest hit communities, but I do want to reinforce that the general grid hardening effort goes well beyond these hard hit circuits. So I don't want to imply that we're ignoring other customers or that other circuits are left behind, but I believe it's appropriate to focus this effort on those that experienced the most shutoffs over the past couple of years. This targeted effort is what we call expedited grid hardening, and that's primarily what I'll be discussing today. Our goal is to achieve reductions in the number of customers impacted, reductions in the number of PSPS events, and reductions in the duration of an event should it occur. And to complete, this is really important, to complete this work in the time frame between now and October 1, which is historically when we see our highest PSPS impacts. We can have events prior to that. They're not as common. So the goal is really to complete all this construction work before the peak season hits right around the beginning of October. We understand, Eric touched upon this, 2020 was a particularly difficult year, and we learned from these events, and really with the goal to improve. And the actual events from the prior years gives us insight on specific areas we need to target. This expedited effort is exploring a number of tools that we believe will improve the customer experience. Some of these tools are shown in the table below that we're utilizing, and the key again here is what we can do in this short time frame. Insulated wires, which is the first one on the list here, it's what we also refer to as covered conductor, and it's an effort to replace our bare wire. Bare wire is open to the elements, and if things come in contact with these wires, much like what would happen if you created a short circuit in your home wiring, and anyone that's done that knows it can create quite a flash and a spark. There's no difference when a tree branch or a palm frond or other debris blows into our lines. It creates what we call a short circuit, and that results in a spark, which could also create an ignition. So covering the wire eliminates this unintentional contact from becoming an ignition. It harmlessly allows the debris to flow in and out of our lines because the wire will have this insulation layer around it. And by insulating our wires, and let me be clear here, when I say insulating our wires, we're not wrapping something around the existing wire. We are replacing it with new wire that has an insulation layer around it. So by doing this, we are able to raise our wind speed thresholds before we would turn the power off. And in some case, we would raise it to a level where PSPS events become unlikely. I'm also going to note that insulating our wire has reliability benefits beyond public safety power shutoff, because wind events can occur throughout the year. I know you're all familiar with this. In fact, I think the forecast is for winds today and tomorrow. So these can cause power to shut off, not PSPS related. It comes from accidental contact from other objects, and these would otherwise cause a circuit to de-energize. But with covered wires, the circuit can often remain energized, even if vegetation and other debris is in our lines. So there's a benefit beyond public safety power shutoff when it comes to covering our wire. The second method listed here is segmentation. This was a focus area for us last year, and we're continuing to build on that for 2021. It involves installing remote-controlled automated switches that allow us to turn the power off in more specific, smaller areas of concern. The benefit to segmentation is that we can reduce the number of customers impacted or the duration for some customers. The third method is installing new weather stations. It's another way that we can reduce PSPS by improving our situational awareness, our understanding of what's actually occurring on the ground in terms of wind speeds, temperature, humidity, and other weather data. It gives us more precision about weather at specific locations. And when you couple that with new automated switches, it gives us the ability to turn the power off in smaller areas and even avoid turning the power off altogether in some cases. The next tool we list here is enhanced switching protocols. Many of our circuits have an electrical connection to an adjacent circuit. If an adjacent circuit is not as impacted, or let's say it's already been hardened, we've already installed covered conductor, then there may be opportunities to switch some customers to an adjacent circuit. Now, it would have to be customers in an area that we don't have a concern, and through the use, let's say, of an automated switch, a remote controlled switch, we can decouple a portion of our customers that are not in high wind area from their main circuit and then switch them over to a nearby circuit. Now, it only works if the nearby circuit is not affected by PSPS, but as we continue to harden all the circuits in an area, we get more of a community benefit effect. So that's what we're looking to do here, and I'll share some of that in some upcoming slides. We also know that, from the past few years, which circuits tend to be more impacted. So we now know where those good opportunities to switch exist because of this historical experience. The fifth item here is updating our operational protocols for the use of PSPS. This is where maybe recent changes in the environment, due to these changes, certain circuits or portions of circuits can be removed from PSPS consideration. An example might be a lack of vegetation in an area, maybe due to a recent fire, but the fuels are no longer present that create the concern that would cause us to utilize a public safety power shutoff. Another example might be as we segment further and further into smaller areas, sometimes those areas result in a location that might traverse, let's say, a parking lot or an area that may not have an ignition risk. So sometimes those present themselves as an opportunity to reduce the need for PSPS. I want to get to a question that we get very often, and then I'll move on to an actual example of a circuit. But a couple of common questions we get frequently. First is, why do my neighbors across the street have power and I don't? And a second one related to this is, why am I de-energized? Why is my power off if I live in an underground area? And the answer to this is that it depends on the circuit that feeds your home as compared to your neighbor. The picture here, it's just a simple illustration. It's intended to depict homes on the left that are fed from underground services. Before it goes underground, the circuit has an overhead section that traverses over a high fire area, and that's shown in the elevated terrain in the far left of the picture. These homes can be subject to PSPS. The homes across the street in this example are fed from a different circuit. And in this example, it's all overhead circuitry, but it does not traverse through high fire area, and therefore they are not subject to PSPS. So this can actually happen where in a neighborhood or even on the same street, homes can have their power delivered from different circuits. And some of this might be a little more apparent when we get to the actual example. I'll try to point that out. So with that, let's actually get to an example, and I'll try to take you through some of the thought process we had when we were looking at these circuits and what are some of the things that we can do. This circuit, so it's an actual circuit, it's the bootlegger. It's a distribution circuit located in the Acton area. It serves about 1,580 customers. The map on the left, I know it's a little hard to see, but the underground portions are shown in green. So those green lines, they are the underground portions of the bootlegger circuit, and the overhead portions are shown in orange. And you can see there's quite a bit more orange on the map, particularly where it travels long distances across some of the more mountainous areas. The substation that the circuit originates from is called appropriately here Acton substation. Shown in the upper left of this map, it's identified by a blue square. Think of the substation as where the electricity originates from. And in this case, it goes from the substation in the upper left and spreads out in this general easterly, southerly direction, kind of moves to the left and down on the map, branching out into all the different populated areas, ultimately going to each individual residence and business. So in the early days of PSPS, if we had a concern on this line, on the circuit, we would open the circuit breaker at the substation. And what that does, same as the circuit breaker in your house panel, it would turn off the power for that entire line. Today, we have 5 segments on this line. They're separated between remote controlled automatic switches, and they're shown on this map. Those switches are shown as a series of letters and numbers in green. They start with the letters RAR. So those are remote controlled automated switches. The easiest way to think about segments is, I'll try to use an example here. Let's say we're talking about the segment at the very bottom of the map. It's a portion below that switch that says RAR 4268. So let's think about that portion of the circuit below that. If we had wind speeds at that portion of the bootlegger that were concerning, but let's say the remainder of the circuit does not have wind speeds that were concerning, then we can turn the power off only at that switch, and that would turn the power off for those customers on the lower portion. So in this case, all the customers beyond that point would have their power off, but the remainder of the customers would not. So segmentation is a really powerful tool to avoid de-energizing in areas that we're not concerned with. Now I'll do the flip side here. However, if we had to turn off power in the very first segment out of the substation, in that case, that first segment would turn off power for all the subsequent segments as well. So that is why some of those underground areas here, they're shown as green lines. If that were to happen, then they could have their power turned off even if they're underground, because the power comes from overhead lines before it goes underground. So now let me turn to the review of the circuit and what the team decided to do. So I'm now on the right-hand side of the screen where we have the bullets. During the review, the team focused on what can we do to reduce the need for shutoffs. And in this case, we already had insulated wire scope, covered conductor scope, that was intended to complete in 2021. The key, though, is that we had to bring it in to complete it before October in order to give us the benefit here for that covered conductor. However, I will say there was some scope that was scheduled to complete in 2022. And this is a problem because if all of it is not completed, then we may not be able to change the thresholds. We may eliminate or greatly reduce the risk of an ignition, but if we left portions of the wire uncovered, then we wouldn't be able to potentially reduce the need for PSPS. So the team recommended and we adopted accelerating that 2022 scope into 2021 and completing it before October. And we could do this because it was already in the planning phase. We typically design our work the year prior to the work being constructed. So it was already in the planning phase. We've now accelerated that work. We're accelerating the design so we can get it into construction and complete that work this year. And by covering all the overhead portions, we'll be able to increase the thresholds up to 40-mile-an-hour sustained and 50-mile-an-hour gusts. So this brings us to the benefit of doing this work, and this is now the lower right-hand portion of the slide. The bootlegger experienced 6 events in 2020, and this is where we turned off the power due to PSPS. All 6 of those events did not exceed the elevated threshold of 40-mile-an-hour sustained, 58-mile-an-hour gusts. So if history repeated itself, let's just say if we had this in place for 2020, we believe it's highly likely that those 6 power shutoff events would not have occurred. So this represents an example of a circuit, and obviously they're all the circuits are different and the solutions are different. But our focus was what can we do to reduce or eliminate the need for PSPS. I will say, there's a couple of things here to consider. One is there's work to do here between now and October, and we are very focused on getting that done. But we've got to secure permits. We've got environmental procedures we must follow. We could have inclement weather, summer heat storms, and other factors, but we're really focused and committed to getting this work done before October 1. I'll also say that a lot of this work will require planned maintenance outages, and so obviously you'll get notices before that occurs, but in order to put this wire in safely, we have to de-energize the line to replace it. So now let me just share, it's just a map of the overall area here, and it represents the 9 circuits that are frequently impacted. There's more circuits in the area, but they didn't cross that 4 or more de-energizations, 4 or more shutoffs since 2019. So these are the 9 circuits that we are really putting this focused effort on rehabilitating. And as I said earlier, there's a lot of work to do on these circuits. All of them have construction work planned over the next 5 months. All of them have, almost all of them have insulated wire scope that is planned. And it's a significant effort. Some of these have tens of miles that we have to replace on a circuit. And this also includes not only replacing the wire, but oftentimes poles and other hardware. And then in addition, I talked about this earlier as well, we're installing automated switches and additional weather stations. So, as I said, some of this work will require planned maintenance outages, but we're doing our best to minimize the impacts of those outages. So let's move on now to what this means overall. These are the 9 circuits that we are working on here in this expedited grid hardening. I just covered the bootlegger, but there's 8 other frequently impacted circuits, total of 9. And this graph depicts the results of our analysis and reviews, factoring in these mitigations developed thus far. And I say thus far because we continue to work on this. But let me explain what the graph means. The dark gray bars it's what actually happened in 2020. And in this case, the higher the bar, the bigger the impacts of turning power off due to PSPS. So the higher the bar, the worse the situation was. And you can see there's a number of these gray bars that are significantly high on this chart. The orange bar is what we believe would have happened in 2020 if we had the mitigations in place that we have developed for these circuits. Okay, so in most cases here, you don't see an orange bar, or it's quite small. So that what you want is the orange bar to be as small as possible, or 0. So overall, what this means for the community is an 86% reduction in PSPS power outage impacts across all 9 circuits if we complete this grid hardening work that we're talking about. These results, they assume the same weather conditions as last year. So I mentioned that earlier. No one can predict future weather this fall, so we don't know if 2020 will repeat itself. Just want to make that caveat. But I will say, from our own experience, 2020 was an impactful year. So this analysis is based on modeling 2020. Let me comment on a few of the circuits here specifically. So first, I went over the bootlegger already. So those 6 events would likely not occur if we complete the construction. And that is why you don't see an orange bar for the bootlegger. That's the best outcome that we can have in terms of the mitigations that we're doing. There's a couple of other circuits like the bootlegger. They are the Davenport and the PIC, where the construction work we are doing would likely result in no public safety power shutoffs if the weather is the same this year as it was last year. The Arlene is on the far left. It does have a small orange bar. This circuit is being fully covered, but they had 4 public safety power shutoff outages last year. 1 would remain, because in that event, they reached over 60 miles an hour. So there would still be a public safety power shutoff. But our estimation is that event would be quite a bit smaller in duration. And the reason for that is because when you have higher thresholds, you reach that point where you turn off the power later in the event. If you just think about in generalizing, the higher the threshold where before you turn off the power, the later it is that you reach that point. And similarly, when the winds start to go down, you cross back below the threshold sooner. So with higher thresholds, the duration of events can shrink, they can reduce. The Bouquet and the Huckleberry did not have any 2020 power shutoffs, but nonetheless, we are installing covered conductor on both of those circuits, with the intent of making it even more unlikely to have an event in 2021. The Laux and the Shovel have very small orange bars. The reason is similar to the Arlene. They're hard to see, I think, on the map, but they're really small. The Sand Canyon, although not as significant as the others, still about an approximate 35% improvement. The circuit is expected to be fully improved by 2022. So there is work on that one. It's some of the work this year, some of it next year. Like I mentioned earlier, there's an overall community benefit of 86%. It's a reduction in the use or the need for PSPS if we can achieve all that work. And by community benefit, what I mean is that improving circuits nearby, there may be some times where we can still keep customers' power on if that nearby circuit is not as impacted. Okay, so with that, I'm going to turn to my last slide here. It's on vegetation management. As mentioned earlier, veg management is an important component of our wildfire mitigation plan, and we now inspect about 1.4 million trees across our service territory every year to determine if they could pose a hazard, by making contact with our power lines. So in addition, tall trees, maybe up to 200 feet from the wires, will be assessed as well, and they may be pruned or removed if they demonstrate a high risk of falling into our lines. And We'll also continue to remove dead, dying, diseased trees in high-risk fire areas. I want to point out something new here. We'll also be removing palm trees that may come in contact with our power lines and pose a risk to public safety. Palm trees are a nuisance for us. Some of them can become pretty good wind sails in the wind. So those areas that do have palm trees will be affected by this program, and customers who have palm trees that would be a part of this will be contacted by Edison representatives to discuss options. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to David to talk about our customer and community engagement. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry, and thank you, community members, for joining us this evening. We know you have options, and we appreciate you taking the time to be with us this evening. I want to encourage just a reminder to please write in those questions that you may have as a result of this evening's discussion. And then there will be an opportunity for a survey at the end of this. So as always, we appreciate your input. The more we hear from you, the better job we can do to improve our services. So thank you. So the next 4 slides I get to present, I'm going to cover our PSPS notifications, our customer care programs, community engagement, and then my last slide will be a call to action where I'm going to actually ask all of you to help to become more prepared. So let's start with notifications. Eric alluded earlier that we have work to do in this space, and I'll just be upfront and say we have fallen short of expectations. We have heard from you, and as a result, we are actually going through an end-to-end review of our notification process to improve and to make it a more viable tool going forward. So let me give you an example of some of the things we're doing. We want to improve on the clarity of language and transparency of what those notifications mean. When you receive a notification from SCE and it says there will be an imminent notification or de-energization, what does that mean to you as opposed to what does it mean to SCE? To you, it may mean my power is going to go out in the next 15 minutes, but in reality, what it means to SCE on the operations side is your power may go out in the next hour, 2 or 3, depending on what we're seeing in forecasting and whether all those triggers have been met. So we need to be more clear with you on what that imminent message means, and that's just an example, some of the things we're working on. Last year we introduced something called zip code level alerts, and the net result of that is we actually created more confusion for you. So we are kind of reversing out of the zip code alerts and really focusing on encouraging signing up for address level alerts. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Zip code alerts are useful, but they're really intended for non-SCE account holders to be able to go to our website, sign up to be alerted when there is a potential de-energization for a zip code. So for example, if you had a parent or loved one that lived in an SCE service territory in a zip code, you could sign up to stay aware of an outage. That was the intent of zip codes, but the result is if you have signed up for both address level and zip codes, we're inundating you with alerts, and it's causing confusion. So we're going to fix that. I do also want to mention that we've heard from many of you in your communities that during these de-energizations, you lose the critical ability to have access to cell service. And so from a safety point of view, that can be significant. If you can't call or get a hold of someone, that's a major issue. We've heard you. Thank you for providing that feedback. And we are actually, as a result of that, working with our county offices of emergency management to see if we can partner with them to use their emergency broadcast radio system to communicate with you during an outage in those situations. So that's just an example of partnering. So there are many ways that you can stay aware and notified of activities. We have enabled several different methods based on your choice. And so if you prefer to get a text message as an example of a notification, we've enabled that. If you prefer voice messages, that is available today. Email alerts, if that is your choice, we can do that as well. When you sign up for alerts, you get to choose which channel you prefer to be communicated in. And we also partnered with Nextdoor. Many of you are familiar with the Nextdoor app, and you can receive local updates and outage information on the Nextdoor app. So I encourage you to load that app and use that as you see fit. The most important point on this slide is the fact that you need to take an action to sign up for the alerts, because if you're not signed up, everything I've just spoken about is really, it's mute. You're not going to benefit from it. So you have to sign up in order to receive these alerts. So I encourage all of you, if you take anything away from my presentation here this evening, please sign up for alerts. Also on our SE.com website, we provide near real-time outage information. We have maps and visuals, just a wealth of information that I encourage you to familiarize yourself with on our website. And we'll provide some information on how to find those sources in the slides ahead. So if we could move forward here on the next slide, which is actually an area where I spend the majority of my time developing customer care programs on my day job. I am pretty passionate about a lot of the things that we have done. We have developed many of these programs based on your feedback. So again, thank you, and it's critically important that we continue to hear from you. So let me talk about one of the most important programs that we've launched last year, and that is our critical care battery backup program. It's targeted towards medical baseline critical care customers, income qualified, living in high fire risk areas. I know that was a mouthful, but it's really targeting our most vulnerable customers. And what we've done is we are fully subsidizing a battery backup system to power critical medical equipment during an outage. We initially targeted about 2,500 customers that would be eligible. We've enhanced the program, and we are now opening up that. We're probably doubling the eligible customers now for that program. So I'm going to say this a couple times through my presentation here, but I'm going to encourage you to go to our website to really familiarize yourself with some of these programs that are available. I'll go quickly through a couple other programs. We have a $50 rebate for a portable power station. The intent of this rebate is really to help customers to invest in resiliency. These are small to large batteries. $50 is going to cover the very small end, which it'll cover about half of the very small end. And these batteries can go up to multi-$1,000 batteries. So this is intended to help you to get started. The smaller batteries can be used to power your modem or router. So during a de-energization, you might still have access to the internet. That might be very important to you. You can charge your laptops, your cell phones, other small devices. These batteries can even power a small medical device like a CPAP machine. So I encourage you to look into that program. And very much targeted to your communities, this next rebate was really launched around having a well water or water pumping dependency. So we heard from you loud and clear last year and in 2019 that when we de-energize, you lose the ability to pump water, to move water. We launched this program last year from a $300 to $500 rebate towards the purchase of a fossil fuel generator when you have a dependency on pumping water. I will share with you that we are enhancing both those programs this year, so changes will be forthcoming. But I encourage you again to look into those programs. The last program, which doesn't get as much visibility, but it's really significant, is our self-generation incentive program. And this is a statewide program that has enhanced incentives for equity resiliency, treating customers in high fire risk areas, and it has an enhancement around pumping water. So these are whole home batteries, if you can think of a Tesla Powerwall, for example, that connect directly into your circuit panel at home or small business. And these batteries can power your home, so they're very significant. And if you happen to have solar, pairing these batteries with solar, it gives you that extra level of resiliency that can carry you through an outage fairly nicely for multiple days if the sun's shining. So some great programs. Again, please encourage you to check into them. Thank you. During a PSPS event, we activate resources to help mitigate the impact of de-energization. Many of you, especially in Acton and Agua Dulce, have experienced our SCE crews out at the Agua Dulce Women's Club, the Acton Community Center, and other locations where we have deployed to help the community during a PSPS event. We have trained resources that this past year and this year with the pandemic have been trained in safety and COVID protocols to offer services to customers in a safe environment. We've included this year what we refer to as a resiliency kit that has some personal protection equipment like gloves, masks, hand sanitizer. We hand out snacks, water. We have a little solar portable charger that can be used immediately to charge your cell phone if your battery is low. So we're trying to think of all these different things that will help mitigate the impact during an outage. And again, many of you have been recipients of those resiliency kits, and we've received very positive feedback. Last bullet in the middle of this slide is our hotel discounts. We have partnered with several local hotels that will provide a discount, either a discount on their daily room rate or a fixed rate for customers who are impacted by a PSPS event. So if you have a need, you can't stay in your home for whatever reason during a PSPS event, you have these discounted hotel options available. Again, they're on our website and all that information is available. Let's talk quickly about community resiliency. We launched a couple of programs to provide resiliency for essential services in rural communities. So what we mean by that is they're in locations where essential services like a market, a gas station, a pharmacy may not be available unless you get in your car and drive 15, 20 miles down the road. And so we are piloting installations of transfer switches and providing a portable generator to the site to power the building during a PSPS event. We have actually 4 between Acton and Agua Dulce that we are almost ready to go live on. So thank you, communities, for participating in those programs with us. We're going to assess and evaluate the benefit of these resiliency zones. And if the benefit warrants the investment, we will increase this and hopefully provide these essential services in other communities. Lake Hughes and Green Valley, I've looked at your locations and I see opportunity for you to participate in these resiliency zones as well. If you're interested, we have the right members on the call today. Please follow up with us. There's an email you can get a hold of us through this presentation. You can always reach out to David Ford and others within SCE if you're interested. So Thank you for that. Let's keep moving here. The next slide, which is our community engagement slide, is all the work that we're doing to try to put together valuable, relevant information to educate you, and then to have these outreach discussions like this evening. It's a great example of how we're trying to educate our community members on the available products and services. We're also doing digital, social media, TV media, radio channel education as well. You may have experienced some of this. We send out an annual PSPS letter to all of our customers with an update on where we are, what we're doing. And then Eric actually touched on this briefly. I'm going to go into a little more detail. We are really super focused on our most vulnerable customers, whether they are access and functional needs, medical baseline, or critical care. When we do have a PSPS de-energization, we want to ensure we've communicated with those customers. Their safety is of utmost importance. So we will, through our different channels, whether it be text, voice, or email, if we cannot confirm that that email has been opened, that text message has been read, we will actually physically go out and knock on the customer's door to make sure they're safe during an event. And this is extremely important to us, and we'll continue to do that. We also partner with several organizations that really help us to become better service providers in this space. Our community-based organizations, emergency preparedness services groups. We have partnered and are in constant discussion with them on how we can improve those services we deliver. And then lastly on this one, we also partner with our public agencies, essential service providers like water companies, water providers, telecom, hospitals. We're in constant communication, working with them on their resiliency to ensure that they are able to provide the services going forward. And let's move to the next slide. And so this is my actual call to action slide. So this is where I'm going to ask all of you to do a couple of things here. I want to encourage you to go to our website to learn about all these programs, educate yourselves on PSPS and Wildfire and why we're doing this. All the programs and services that are available to help you. Also, please, a reminder to provide feedback through the survey link that you'll be given this evening. I've said this, but I want to say it again. Sign up for alerts, please. It's our way to communicate with you during these critical times. Our medical baseline program is one of our gateways into qualifying for many of these services. It's an actual rate. Medical baseline is a rate that increases your tier 1, which is your lower level of electricity. And so that'll give you a higher tier 1 baseline to ultimately lower your cost of energy. Please look into those rebate programs, whether it's the portable power station or the generators to help you with pumping water. Lastly, whether it's PSPS, an earthquake, any other type of emergency, the call to action here is to be prepared. Make sure you have the supplies you need to take care of yourself and your loved ones during these emergency events. There's a wealth of information on SCE's site. We link to several external sites to help you be prepared. And I encourage you to all again to familiarize yourself with that. So with that, I'm going to end my my slides and turn this back over to David.
Thank you so much. We are now opening up this part of the program to Q&A, and I would encourage you to continue to post questions in the chat box. I also want to thank those who submitted questions during their time of registration. And we actually have a couple questions that we would like to discuss before we get into the chat box that were sent in during the registration. And Dave Kynes, I'd like to direct this question to you. Can SCE provide meals and water container spouts to customers doing PSPS?
Thank you for that question, and it is very relevant. So many of you are aware that in certain circumstances we have provided hot meals. Thanksgiving was an example. We look at each event on an individual basis to understand the impact, and if we feel it is warranted, we will take that step to take that action. As an example, Thanksgiving providing over 1,000 Thanksgiving meals to customers that were impacted. We're looking at other alternatives too that might be more efficient and more effective. I'm not going to go into details, but besides providing hot meals, which can be logistically challenging, we're looking at other options that will also help mitigate that impact for you. With regards to water, so especially for the communities that are with us this evening, we have made a decision on most of our events to provide bulk water. And what that means is we're providing palletized 1 or 2 gallon containers of water. Most of these containers have a spout. It's small. You're all familiar with what you see in the market when you buy these. But we are dropping pallets of these of water to the community resource centers, community crew vehicles to hand out to our customers during these events. So that is currently something we do frequently. Beyond that, we provide bottled water to all customers, so they have water and snacks during the events. Thank you for that question.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Terry, this question probably should be directed to you. Can we get more detailed maps of the grid hardening work?
Yeah, thank you, Dave. We're working on providing more visibility to the public on construction status and including maps. So we'll be pivoting to that shortly. Right now, we're really working on just getting our plans together for what's coming up. But we're aware that customers are interested in seeing circuit maps and that data and construction progress as well. I think there's been some questions about that. So sometime probably around the end of April, we'll look to provide some information probably off of our website on maps and construction progress.
Okay, thank you. Eric, I'd like to direct this question to you. How can customers, what can they do to make their homes more safe during wildfire season or year-round from fires?
Thanks for the question. I think it's an important one, and part of it, I would say, we can direct customers to our SC.com Wildfire, where we do have a section there on being prepared. But I would also say more broadly, CAL FIRE has a great website. If you can go to readyforwildfire.org, there is some really good information there around home hardening, things that you could do to prepare yourself in terms of emergency kits, and just overall plan and how to respond. So I would recommend visiting that website as well as our own.
Okay. Thank you, Eric. I'm going to keep you on this discussion. This next question probably is directed to you as well. What happens to PSPS criteria being during high winds and low humidity and high temperatures? The last couple of PSPS events have been triggered by high winds while low temperatures and double-digit humidity.
I appreciate the question, and let me start off by talking a little bit about our protocols and then how we consider things like humidity. So first of all, our PSPS protocols are designed to prevent the electric system from becoming the source of ignition that can turn into a large or damaging wildfire. Now, in order for this risk to be present, both fuel conditions or our assessment of fuel conditions need to be in a place where we determine that they're an elevated or even a severe condition, considering dryness and how much moisture is in the fuel itself, as well as the wind speeds that can spread fires. Now, to monitor these conditions, we have a dedicated team of people. We operate an incident command system, and we monitor all the weather stations in our network, as I described before. Now, these weather stations, they capture data around wind speeds, both sustained as well as wind gusts, humidity, and things that are pertinent to understanding the real-time situation, and they update every 10 minutes. Now, our protocols are based on those conditions, and unfortunately, what's occurred sometimes is that they've been followed by events where humidity has come in or preceded by precipitation. So what happens here is that in order for us to better determine what kind of weather conditions we're dealing with, we do need to take into account when the actual period is when those dry and windy conditions are. Now, if precipitation or humidity does factor in, it could either turn into a shorter event because we recognize that now the risk is becoming mitigated, or sometimes if humidity clears up and then the weather event starts, it actually begins to dry out the fuel very rapidly, and we get into the event, right after high periods of high humidity. And temperatures really don't factor in. Unfortunately, large fires have occurred during periods of low temperature, but that's why it's really important for us to monitor these real-time conditions when we consider things like PSPS.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Terry, I'm going to ask you to weigh in on this question. Will we be publishing a public plan schedule of the work we plan to do to harden the delivery network of these communities in the near future?
Yeah, similar to the other question, we are planning on doing that. So as I said earlier, sometime around the end of April, we've been really focusing on developing our plans right now for expedited grid hardening, and this is going to change by April 15th. We're finalizing those plans, and then we're going to really pivot to the construction work. So at some point after that, we'll look for a way to provide that type of status, likely via our website, on the progress for these circuits.
Okay, Terry, I'm going to keep you on for this next question because it's relating to circuit. This particular question is about the shovel circuit, or the locks and the shovel. The shovel circuit is located within the lock circuit. Each circuit should have its own weather station. Why is this not happening?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the Laux, so there is actually now weather stations on all those circuits. I believe there's 2 on the Laux, 7 on the Davenport, and then there's also 5 on the shovel. And the Laux can be carried by either the Davenport or the shovel. I think we had a situation last year where during one of the events, one of the circuits wasn't available. I think it was the Davenport. So during that event, it was covered by the shovel. That reduces our flexibility. So the idea is that we wouldn't want that to occur. But I'll also say we're greatly improving all those circuits. So the likelihood diminishes. The Davenport, we think wouldn't if all conditions being equal, wouldn't have events. The shovel goes significantly down, and so does the Laux. So the community benefit there is part of it, to the extent that we can keep those 2 sources energized and avoid de-energizations. That will benefit the Laux as well, and the Laux itself, which was subject to de-energization, has also improved. So I think there's a lot going on there. I think I addressed most of it. We now do have weather stations separately on all 3 of those.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Eric, on this next question, I want to direct it toward you. It's regarding telecommunication companies and battery backup. Why don't telecommunications have battery backup? When we lose power in Agua Dulce, most cable and cell towers are out, all communication is eliminated.
Yeah, I certainly agree with the challenge and understand the difficulties when it comes to losing communications and internet. What we're doing is that we are engaging telecom providers, sharing our PSPS experience, both in areas that have been de-energized, as well as our plans to mitigate, as Terry went over. And really the goal here is to have a conversation with telecom providers on what they can do to improve their resiliency, which we believe is necessary. And we would like to see the telecom infrastructure become more resilient to power outages. So we're holding workshops with the providers to have discussions to both share the information on what we're doing, as well as ways that they can improve their resiliency.
Okay, thank you. Terry, this next question is related to temperatures and our activation of PSPS. What does temperatures play in whether or not we activate PSPS during a wind event?
Yeah, it's probably Eric's, a little more in Eric's expertise, but there's a variety of factors that are taken into account that look at the condition of the fuels on the ground. And those, some of those factors would include various weather conditions, such as humidity levels. Temperatures can dry out the fuels, which can create a problem, as can wind. So all these things, the forecast of all these things play into ultimately the determination of the fuels in the area that will factor into whether we begin a PSPS notification. But Eric, I'm going to hand it to you and let you add some context.
Yeah, I think you covered it well. I will add that we understand, it was really difficult when we had these events towards the end of the year when temperatures dropped, and cold temperatures is even adding to the challenges with not having power. So one of the things, though, that happened at the end of the year was we had a bundle of Santa Ana wind events, and Santa Ana wind events are essentially situations where the humidity levels drop and wind speeds pick up, and unfortunately had happened in periods of time when the temperatures were low. So fuel can be as dry under low temperature conditions as well as high. But yeah, I think we typically associate Santa Ana wind events with warmer temperatures. But unfortunately, in those times, we actually had some cold temperature Santa Ana events.
Okay, thank you. Eric, I'm going to ask you probably to respond to this last question that we have in chat. It's 8 events since September 2020. The frequency of PSPS, how do we determine if it's the last resort? If you have 8 events, and how do we determine the criteria for PSPS?
Yeah, we recognize that 8 is a lot, and that's why the criteria for us to begin our efforts to harden the grid. We started off with looking at de-energization numbers, folks that have experienced 4 or more since 2019 up to date through 2021, and so we believe that through these hardening activities, as we showed the benefits associated with that, should significantly decrease. Now, in terms of the last resort, there are a number of steps that we do take to really try to minimize the frequency and scope of PSPS. Up to this point, what we've been doing is really trying to narrow the de-energization to the smallest area possible, looking at the live or the real time conditions in our weather stations, and aligning those with the segmentation plans that we have developed for all of our circuits that are in high fire risk areas. So we use the best information we can. We minimize the outages as much as we can, but given where we're at today, it really takes us to further harden the system in order to really make a significant reduction in the number of events that we've seen.
Thank you very much. This last question is one more question I'll answer myself. Will we be sharing out these slides? And certainly you'll be able to see this recording will be posted on our website in a few days at sce.com/wildfire. If there are no other questions that will be posted in chat at this time, I would like to thank everyone for their participation this evening. As we mentioned earlier, you will be receiving a survey to provide us feedback. This session has been recorded. You'll be able to review the session on our website in a few days, as I just mentioned, at sce.com/wildfire, as well as other information resources that we provided in tonight's community meeting. I want to thank you all again and wish you and your family health and good wealth, healthy life and abundance. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you.